There are moments in life when the universe whispers to us, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the smallest, most unexpected ways. Sometimes it takes an accident, a wrong number, or a voice from the past to remind us what we've been running from. This is a story about one man who learned that lesson too late to save one relationship, but just in time to save another. Marcus sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he'd spent decades building. At 53, he'd achieved everything the world told him to want: the promotion, the penthouse, the perfect salary. But somewhere between the spreadsheets and the conference calls, he'd lost something he couldn't buy back. His phone buzzed, another email, another meeting, another reason to stay just a little longer. He was scrolling through messages when his thumb slipped. His finger hit a contact he hadn't called in 3 years. The phone dialed before he could stop it, but no one answered. Instead, a familiar voice filled the silence. "Hi, you've reached Margaret. I can't come to the phone right now, but your call means so much to me. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for calling." His mother. Marcus's hand went numb. The phone nearly slipped from his grip. It had been 6 years since the funeral. 6 years since he told himself he was too busy to visit during her illness. 6 years of throwing himself into work to avoid the guilt that came with remembering all the dinners he'd missed, all the calls he'd let go to voicemail, all the times he'd chosen his job over her voice. He sat frozen in his leather chair, listening to her gentle greeting over and over. She sounded so hopeful in that message, like she genuinely believed the people she loved would call her back, like she had all the time in the world to reconnect. But she didn't, and now neither did he. As Marcus stared out at the city lights beginning to glow in the evening sky, a thought crept into his mind like a thief in the night. His daughter Emma, 17 years old. They hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, not since he'd missed her graduation because of a critical business merger. She'd stopped trying to reach out after that. The silence between them had become so complete that he'd almost forgotten what her laugh sounded like. What would you have done in that moment? Standing there, hearing your mother's voice one last time, would you finally understand what matters? That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He scrolled through his contacts until he found her name, Emma. His thumb hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity. He'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his head, always finding a reason to wait. Tomorrow would be better. Next week, he'd have more time. The right moment would come. But there was no right moment. There was only now. His heart pounding, Marcus pressed call. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Dad." "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered. "I know I have no right to ask this, but can we talk?" What followed wasn't a miraculous reconciliation. Emma didn't rush back into his arms. There were tears, yes, but also anger. Years of it finally spoken. She told him how it felt to have a father who was never really there. How she'd stopped expecting him to show up. How she'd learned not to need him. But something shifted that night. For the first time, Marcus listened without planning his rebuttal. He didn't check his phone. He didn't think about work. He simply sat with his daughter and acknowledged the pain he'd caused. It took weeks of conversations, of genuine effort, of slowly rebuilding what he'd so carelessly let fall apart. But gradually, something began to heal. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more life lessons that remind us what really matters. 3 months later, Marcus sat across from Emma in a small cafe, not because he had to, but because he chose to. She was telling him about her college plans, her dreams, her fears, and he was there, truly there, not distracted, not distant.